probably tell you guys a little bit more if you attend another class with me about the meaning of this name, Nesut Biti. But for this class, you can refer to me as just Suit. Okay, Suit. I'll tell you more about that later. But so today, I'm going to be mathematically proving spirituality through mathematics, and proving to each one of you today that you guys have spirits in your bodies. Okay, that you're not just bodies, because a lot of times in our society and culture, we just think that we're physical beings and we can just do physical stuff to help us, like pop this pill or take these antibiotics and stuff. But there's other ways that you can heal yourself, and I'm going to be teaching you guys a little bit more about what you can actually do to gain control of your life. It's called mental mastery, right? Okay, so let's see here. So I guess the first thing we need to talk about is, what is a spirit? Okay, today is going to be a little bit heavy on the mathematics side, but if I do another class, it's not all going to be mathematics. It's a lot interesting information I'm going to be pushing out. But a spirit is pretty much this notion that you have something that isn't your physical body, that is inside of your body, that some like to believe controls your body. Some people would say through spirituality you can manipulate the physical realm. So some people like to believe that. Some people like to say some of the things associated with spirits are that you can embody other spirits. Like in some religions they might say you can embody the Holy Ghost, or you have maybe Native American cultures have an ancient spirit of warriors. African cultures would like to believe in the spirit of our ancestors, right? So I'm certain that we've all heard some of these terms. So we're going to be diving a little bit deeper into what actually is this concept of a spirit, and how can we prove it mathematically. Now, I have an innate ability to understand things mathematically, and this is important because before concepts like gravity, people would say, gravity is just woo-has. A lot of people think about spirituality like, what is it? Like, I can't see it, I don't really believe in it. But until, I think it was like Isaac Newton came and put numbers to gravity, where he said gravity is 9.8 meters per second squared. For those of you who don't know, that's the mathematical number that gravity pulls things in, on Earth at least, based upon the math. Until he put numbers to it, then the rest of the world could kind of be like, okay, I can see that this thing is falling at the same rate, and when I move this thing is actually moving. Now we put numbers to it. So just to kind of throw some things out in the future, eventually I'm going to be going over so I'm reinventing science. That's what we're doing some pretty big stuff right here. I'm going to reinvent the way people think about what science actually is, right? So I'm going to start giving numbers to things like attraction, right? People don't think about beauty. How can you quantify beauty? How can these are concepts that all deal with the spirit, but until we have the eyes of understanding what the spirit actually is, you'll never really think to put a number to it. Like, how can I make myself quantifiably more attractive and quantifiably attract more people? Because if I want to have gains, don't I quantify the amount of protein and the amount of foods I'm eating? See, that's all thinking in the physical realm, but how can we put the numbers to the spiritual realm and still produce some real results for ourselves? Okay, so that's what we're going to be doing, right? Okay, so bear with me. So today, how we're going to be proving spirituality is we're going to also be deconstructing some of the things that we know about dimensions. Okay, so I'm going to go over some quick concepts that have been put out about dimensions that I believe have a majority of people misled, and they don't really understand what it is because of the way that we've been taught to think about things, especially this concept of time, because we've been taught to think about it a certain way, so we can't see outside of what are the other ways to think about it. It's kind of like marriage. We've been taught you got to find a partner this way, that way. So when you go to other cultures, you don't really understand, like, I can think about it this way too, and it kind of works. Right? So one of the misconceptions that I'm going to identify today is that, just quick question, show of hands, how many people believe that we exist in the third dimension? Think we're three-dimensional creatures. Okay. Do any of you guys think we exist in higher dimensions or lower dimensions? Higher dimensions? Like, how high would you go? What dimension would you say that we're in?
I'd say like fifth.
You think we're in the fifth dimension?
Well, like as of right now,
Uh-huh.
I feel feel like we're in a fourth transitioning into fifth.
Fourth transitioning into fifth. Okay. How do you come up with that? If you had to explain it to someone, how you?
It's kind of hard for me to explain because I learned it a while ago.
Okay.
So.
Well, today I'm gonna be teaching you how to actually explain that. Right? Okay. So a lot of times we get told that we're in this third dimension, this concept of the third dimension, because we understand blocks. You know, they show us things like a block, right? And they're like, oh, this is what the third dimension is. It's a little box thing here, and they give us that concept, and they say, now we're in the third dimension, and they say, how do you know? Because everything, they give you the concept of what you can see, right? If I draw a tree here, they say, sorry, I know this drawing is butched right now, but okay, hopefully you can all see that. If I draw a tree here, this is obviously the tree's shadow, right? They say, oh, the only way you know that's a shadow is because of depth perception, whereas everything that you see is not really three-dimensional, you're just interpreting it based upon the shadows and stuff. So I can draw a picture and make you think that it's three-dimensional, but it's actually two-dimensional, right? And they try to trick you like that and say, you don't really know that you're in the third dimension or not. You're just looking at a two-dimensional picture and interpreting it, and your brain naturally puts it together that it's three-dimensional, right? Okay, but the trick of the matter that I'm going to show you is there's two types of ways we can see, okay? It's this way that we see, okay? All right, and then it's this way that we see. Okay, how many people have ever seen this symbol? I don't know if you can see this symbol. All right, okay. So this is a ancient Egyptian symbol called the Eye of Horus, okay? And I'll be telling you a little bit about the ancient ideology behind this concept, right? And pretty much to cut it short, just to summarize it for you, the trick is to get you to believe that seeing is believing, but we all know that seeing is not believing, because a lot of times our eyes play tricks on us. What's actually believing is this concept is actually, it lines up, and I'll do another class on this later, but it lines up with your brain being sliced in half. And it actually, each piece of this is a piece right here, this is a piece right here. Each piece of this corresponds to a sense, one of your senses. So it tells you how you actually see with what is known as the third eye, which is the eye in the brain, which is, this one is, it's probably like smell. This one is thought right here, because they say like the eyebrows show the expression of thought. When you're happy, your eyebrows get excited. When you're mad, you know. And each one of these senses corresponds: touch, taste, smell, sight, and hearing, thought. So they had 6 senses, right? Each one of these senses corresponds to a fraction in ancient Egypt, and they actually have weight. So I'll touch on that a little bit more later. But today we're going to be talking about how if you see with your mind, it's different from how you just see with your eye, because your eye is just one of 5 other senses, and it's not even the most important one. Later I'll tell you guys what the actual most important sense is that we actually use, okay? So that's one of the tricks and the misconceptions is that, you know, they tell you to look with your eye and you don't really know what's going on, but you can clearly feel something. Say, wait a minute, with my eyes of my hands, this is 3-dimensional. I'm not getting tricked about that. I can hug this, wrap around it, right? My eyes and my nose, I can smell is something different, you know? So that's one thing. Another trick is, this is what I'm gonna wrap it around to, is if everything exists in, well, let's draw it like this. And I wanted to, I have to flip it, right? So yeah. Okay, here we have 2 right triangles, right? If I wanted this triangle, this right triangle, to match this right triangle, and I try to flip it, right? Flip it 90 degrees, it would turn into this. And we can see that that doesn't match, right? Flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn into this. So we're gonna flip it, we're gonna flip it again, it would turn into this. And we can clearly see that that doesn't match, right? That triangle does not match that triangle, right? We flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn into the opposite of that, which would be this. I'm gonna draw it over here just for the sake of the video. Flip another 90 degrees, it would turn into this. Obviously doesn't match, right? And then we flip it another 90 degrees, it would turn back into what it was in the beginning, right? So we can see each time we flip this thing on this two-dimensional surface, there's no orientation of whether, if we flip it 360 degrees to get this to match this triangle, right? You can't flip it to make it match, because you'd have to take this triangle, take it out of the page, flip it over like a book, then it would match, right? So this is the concept of two-dimensional space being stuck in a two-dimensional space and not being able to align with what you're trying to align with. And we're going to talk about how can we break into that third dimension to actually get the alignment that we're looking for. Does that make sense? Okay. But we won't be able to break out of the space unless we actually access the third dimension and flip it over. But we all know triangles don't just flip randomly. Triangles have no arms, no legs, no eyes, you know. So that's important to understand that we're also talking about reality here. You don't want to make too many outlandish ideas, because that's where the tricks come in. Always focus on reality, right? So we're going to be talking about how can we come out of one dimension, go into another one in order to get the transformation in a lower dimension that we're looking for, right? Remember, this is all about mind mastery, okay? How we're going to master our minds, right? Okay, so these are just some of the quick misconceptions that people have about dimensions and stuff and the way that we think about it, right? Okay, so now we've kind of talked about what spirituality is. Let's talk about what a dimension actually is, right? Let's throwing that word around. A dimension is anything used to, is a set of directions used to describe a position somewhere in space, right? And that's the way I describe it, okay? So, for instance, I'm going to go into depth, but just as a quick overall view to kind of orient your minds. A point has no dimensions, right? A dot has no dimensions. You don't need to describe this thing anywhere in space or anything, right? You say, what do you mean by that? Okay, boom. The next dimension, this is 0 dimension. The next dimension will be a line, right? A line is described in 1 dimension, as in length. You put 0 here. What is that line? This is a line of 1. This is a line of 2. You know, it's on the 0 axis. A page, a plane, is described in 2 dimensions, length and width. Now, as we keep adding dimensions, what I'm going to show you, length and width becomes 0. Then you get 1, 2, 3. You're adding dimensions at right angles. When you get to a 90-degree angle, you get another dimension, right? Okay. But as you can describe something else in another way, to add to describe its locality in this thing that we call space, this location, that is how we get dimensions. As in, where is this pin right now? Well, it's 5 meters to the left right here, 3 meters from that wall. It's off the ground this amount of meters. It's inside the door this amount of meter. It's this far from outside. Okay, third dimension is going to be in and out, but that's what we're talking about when we talk about dimensions. Ways to describe where we are in space and in time. This concept of what we have time. These are going to be ways to describe where we are in space and time. And this is important because this will also give you the clue to how you can use these higher dimensions to actually navigate your space and time. Because we know, like, if we're stuck in the woods, it's important for us to figure out where we're going to understand where we are in space. But if we're lost in our lives, how do we figure out where do we go in our space and time, right? Okay, so let's get into the heavy math portion, right? I'm gonna leave these two up. So the first thing that we're going to be talking about is, draw it like this. This is 0D. I just drew the 0 dimension, okay? Try to go through it quick. In the 0 dimension, you would be what's known as, this is the dimension here. The 0 dimension, and when we're talking about a dimension, we're talking about the totality of the universe, not just one little thing. We're talking about, this is what the universe is. So in the 0 dimension, it would exist in just a point. You can't really describe it anywhere. It just floats around, it doesn't do anything. What you would see with your eyes is a complete black screen. You wouldn't see anything. Just imagine being stuck out in space. You can't feel anything. You don't really know you got a body. You can't open your eyes. You're just floating in darkness. You don't know if you're touching something. So you kind of feel one with everything else because you never knew anything to be separate from yourself. You're just in complete darkness. This is the 0 dimension. And also in dimensions, we're talking about, what we're going to start to understand is that we're talking less about structures and we're talking more about consciousness. This is how consciousness comes into being, right? So complete darkness. Like before you was a baby, you don't know where you just came from. You just popped up somewhere. Like I was just nowhere at first. And then I just thought, and I had my first thought running around my grandma or, what was I before that? I was just nothing and just straight darkness, right? That's what you would see with your eyes. What you experience with your brain will be nothing. Like it's just dark. It's unconsciousness, right? That's the 0D. Draw as many as I can until we run out of space here. Okay, the first dimension, that dimension, each dimension is when the consciousness learns that it can move, right? So when this consciousness learns that it can move, you get one dimension, which is 2 balls here. One dimension, when one point, because we all know that a line, the most basic definition of a line is 2 points, right? You gotta have 2 points to make a line. One point is one. So the next dimension, the most basic dimension, is as soon as that inches one little, like whatever little small increment you want to put there, and you're into the second dimension, which is 2 balls here, right? This would be a line. This dimension is called length, right? In this line dimension, you would exist as a ball. You would exist. What you would see, you would be able to perceive the ball, right? But what you could tell with your brain, what you would be encroaching upon is the understanding slightly that there may be a tube dimension. Just imagine a spitball. That is the length dimension, right? So now we exited the dot and we realized, like, oh, there's more dots out here. So it's 2 dots, line, right? This is the 1D length. Then I'm just going to go through these quick. Then you get width in the 2D. Length and width, it becomes, this is a dot in the back, a dot right here, and a dot right here. So I'm going to draw these 3. And there's a dot in the back. So imagine like a triangle, right? Okay, well, let me go back to the first dimension. Why would you only see a dot right here? Because if you're a spitball in the straw, the most that you can see is what's in front of you. You can't go around it, you're stuck. And if there's another spitball, all you see is blackness. That's what you know for your whole universe, just a black dot in front of you. If you're the last line in the straw, then you see just a white light at the end of the tunnel. And throughout your whole life, you're just wondering, what is that thing in front of me? I can't move. I can't physically move in this universe. All I can do, because I'm confined by the confines of the universe, is just imagine, what is this black dot in front of me? Or what is this little white thing? And sometimes we know dimensions are not stagnant. If somebody wagged that straw, sometimes the white dot may go away and it may come back, but you can only see what's right in front of you. So you're just trying to figure out what life is. And you might have an inference, like if you were an intelligent dot, I think I may be in a straw. But because I'm confined by the straw, I can't see outside of the universe. It's physically impossible to see outside to tell that I'm in a straw, unless somebody pulls me outside of that universe and I'm able to look down and say, oh snap, I'm in a straw. And we will find that this happens sometimes to humans. They get pulled outside of the universe and look down at it. But, okay, boom. The second one is width. So imagine you get 3 magnetic balls and you put them together and it forms a triangle. That's the simplest form of a page, right? The most that you can see in a length-width dimension, because we just add, we keep the ones below, is a line, right? And you would exist in what's known as a plane. So what do I mean that the most you can see is a line, right? If we exist in a paper dimension, right? We have a piece of paper. We all exist in this paper. If I were to put my finger through the paper, we wouldn't be able to see my complete finger going down. We would just see the tip of the finger first, and then we would see that line get a little wider as it passes through the paper. Then it will stay constant once it reaches the side of the paper and then eventually go away. Is that making sense? A little bit, man. All right, so imagine you're looking through a slit and you can't see anything but inside the slit. That is what the dimension is. You wouldn't be able to tell what the 3-dimensional things are when they passing through. You just see something start to pass through, stops, and it goes away because you only see through the slit. That's all you can view. So you're only viewing a line of what is a larger body. Like you can't, so this is what you're seeing. But with your brain's eye, not just your eyeball, you will be able to infer certain things like, okay, like I'm trying to be this triangle that moves around a certain place, but I can't get outside of this, but I'm watching this line grow and get smaller and then exit my universe. I have a theory that there may be something else, right? There may be something that doesn't really behave like this, okay? Don't want to just bog you down, but that's what you would exist as here. So this is like 3 balls together, right? And that's like 3 people come together, you're like, okay, now we can form a little plane here, right? So now length, width, and now we're going to add this dimension of height. Now, just be mindful, a lot of times when we describe these dimensions, they cube them. They make them cubes, and they make them straight structures. So instead of giving the ball, they would give a point. Instead of giving the 2 dots, they would show you a line. Instead of giving the 3 dots, the magnets, they would give you a plane, like what I drew out here, right? And now when we add height in 3rd dimension, we get a ball on top of these 3 balls, right? Consciousness of a different dimension where we understand that after we have mastered the dimensions of just simply being, and we master the dimensions of striving forward, length, then we master the dimensions of width. Now we have some sort of support system that would allow us to produce what is known as height, right? A lot of times when we draw this out, they draw it out like a cube. Okay. Cubed it. That's an ugly cube. That's terrible cube. I can do better. Let me draw it the way that we used to draw it back in school. You draw one square, you draw another square, and you just connect it. Okay, bye. Right? That's how they would show you it, right? But imagine just the 3 triangular dots, and then now you can set a 3rd ball on top of that ball, and you kind of start to understand that something's going up here, right? Now within the cube dimension, this is where the trick comes in. We would only be able to see a plane. Because as something passes through our dimension, the cube dimension is like a TV. Everything on that TV is flat. Though it may look like it's, when we look at the shadows, everything is flat. Here, as we're looking, we can only see 1 dimension lower. So in the 2-dimensional realm, you can only see the dot, right? But the dot was a 0 dimension, remember? In the width realm, in the paper realm, you can only see a line. But the line is literally the 1D dimension, right? In the third dimension, on the TV screen, you can only see a flat surface. But the flat surface is the plane dimension, 2D, right? So I'm also going to be, I'm going to tell it back before I start talking about the fourth and fifth dimension, because I don't know if everybody's familiar with those. So I'm going to start talking about what these dimensions actually are, right? So all the way up into the third dimension, right now, we don't have a concept of time. Time doesn't come into play until the fourth dimension. So these are all things that are not concerned with time, literally mathematically. So mathematically, to describe, because remember what a dimension is, it's describing where something is in a space, right? So mathematically, what we would call this, the length dimension is what's known as an x, right? The width dimension would be a y, and then the height dimension would be a z. Have we all been to math class? Have we ever heard of these things? So on the line, it would look like this. You get these little things, then you get these little things, right? And this is this 1-2 dimension. Now the z-axis exists perpendicular to these, right? So this would be x, this would be y, this would be z, right? And using these, we can describe where the point is relative to, what numbers we give it, right? So that is the 1, 2, 3 dimension. But unfortunately, these things don't have time compared to them. So what I'm proposing is that in the third dimensional object, because it's confined by its universe, as in it can never know that it's in the third dimension. It will never be able to know it. There's no way to actually know it because the whole universe is this dimension. Would be something like this. Because if I set this here with no brain, with no intelligence, the only thing that this block would ever know is the surface that I set it on, which is a 2-dimensional flat surface. And there's no way it can move, there's no way it can ever leave its third dimensional body to ever tell there's anything else unless something outside of its universe comes and grabs it and moves it. And it may speculate, because it doesn't have eyes to see, doesn't have consciousness to know. It may speculate that, when I get lifted over here and I'm experiencing this plane now, I might be in a realm larger than what I think I'm in. But these inanimate objects, because time does not exist for inanimate objects, will never be able to know anything outside of what it is immediately connected to. Does that kind of make sense? So these are the real third dimensional objects. Things without souls, things without life, right? So that's the trick. They want you to get you to believe that you don't have a soul, you don't have a life. All you can know is just the 2-dimension in front of you. But we have bodies and other senses to tell us, like, no, I can literally go move myself until this has 3 dimensions. So I'm obviously not in that dimension because I'm outside of it, I can see it. You know what I'm saying? So that is the third dimension. So now we're going to move up to, that's 3 dimensions. I'll pause it here, see if you guys have any questions. You guys have any questions about so far? Oh, okay, hopefully I'm making sense, right? So that's 3 dimensions. And these are 3 spatial, what are considered the 3 spatial dimensions, right? So these are inanimate objects that would never be able to tell that it's outside of 3 dimensions. So now we're going to move up to the 4th and 5th dimension and describe what those things are. Keep in mind these concepts, as you go up, the most you can know is 1 dimension lower. That's the most you'll be able to see, but you can make inferences about the higher dimensions. But there's ways that we can tell, we can make guesses about what's higher, but because we're trapped and confined by those dimensions, like what's in the straw, we won't ever be able to tell that we're inside the dimension unless something outside of our dimension contacts us and moves us around and shows us that we're in that dimension. Right. Okay. Hopefully that is making sense. Okay, now we're going to go to the 4th dimension. 4th dimension is what's known as a tesseract. Okay, Now, remember I said that each dimension is once you are, if you want to think about how to draw a dimension, is once you're conscious that you can move, but it also builds upon each dimension lower. So real quick, first dimension was a dot, then a dot discovers it can move. So, no, the zero dimension was a dot, dot discovers it can move. It's the first dimension, which is a line, right? Then the line discovers it can move. So let's say the line moves this way. Then this becomes, building upon what it was before, the second dimension, length and width, which is a plane. Then the plane discovers it can move, right? Let's say it moves this way, right? The plane becomes what's known as a cube, you know? So the plane discovers it can move, it becomes that, right? Now, if the cube discovers it can move, it becomes what's known as a tesseract. So the cube goes this way. It's gonna get a little confusing here. So it's gonna go boom, 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 boom. No, yeah. And then this face is actually as a box. Okay. So I know it looks a little confusing. So just imagine, I drew the box bigger, but imagine if it just grew, it just moved. The cube discovers, hey, I can move. So the tesseract is what's known, you can look it up, it looks like a cube within a cube, right? But oftentimes when people talk about tesseract shapes, they show this cube that's able to transform into the outer cube, it turns into the inner cube, and it can go around infinitely. And they also associate the tesseract with being able to see multiple realities at one time, all the possible realities in it. And you know, they throw all these hoo-ha terms around it, and you kind of get lost, right? Like, what is this fourth dimension where this cube discovers it can move, right? So it's shaped by a cube within a cube, right? So what I'm suggesting that science has wrong is that the tesseract, the cube within the cube that we are aware of, because we exist on that level, is your brain, it's your mind. That would be the physical structure of a cube within a cube. It's when we're able to have this idea of X, Y, Z, and then the next concept after X, Y, and Z, if anybody knows mathematics, then you jump into, out of calculus, and you jump into what's called physics, time, right? The next variable is time. When you say meters per second squared, when you jump like this object is able to move this, you know. So we're able to obviously see and perceive that, which means we're not in that dimension, right? Because if we're able to see and perceive it, we obviously have to be inside of it. I mean, outside of it to see it, because we can only make suggestions about the higher dimensions. Remember from the all right, also a key concept to understand about just life in general is that the world is a fractal pattern. A fractal pattern is a pattern that exists on a smaller scale the same way it exists on a larger scale. As in, it would be hard to draw, but pretty much it would be like understanding that smaller concepts are the same as the larger concepts, they're just scaled higher, right? As in, if I provide energy for a cell, it's able to do more. The cell is able to do more if I provide energy. So I can assume, based upon the fractal pattern of mathematics, that if I provide energy for a group of cells, they would be able to do more, right? Because on a smaller scale, we can see that this is going on. And so we can make certain inferences, certain logical inferences about reality, right? So that's why we're able to tell that, hey, if every one of these lower dimensions, you can't see it until we can pretty much assume that as you keep going on up, it follows the same mathematical pattern here, you see? So we understand length, width, height, and time, right? now we got this concept of time. Now, I'm going to double back and talk about this, and I'm going to kind of touch upon, I'm not going to go too deep, I might do another class about how you'll actually be able to use these dimensions, but talk about what this means to us and how we can utilize this understanding of time and redefine the way that we actually think about time so we can begin to use our time properly. Because the way that we've been taught to think about time is counterintuitive to reality once you really sit down and think about it, right? Okay, so the tesseract is time, which is really your mind, which stores memories, right? Time, I think about time as in moments. That's all time is a moment. It's not really what we consider time. Time is a flip book of two-dimensional pictures that, whatever. And I'll touch a little bit more on the tesseract concept here, but then we're going to go up to what I propose is the dimension that we actually exist in, all right? The 5D. The fifth dimension is what's known as a penteract. Now these are all mathematical concepts. You can look this up. They'll tell you they really don't know what the shape of a penteract looked like. But all it would be the tesseract discovers it can move, and then you got 5 dimensions that you could be able to describe where you are in space-time. Okay? So what are these dimensions that we're able to describe? So now we can describe where it was and the time that it was there. That's another way that we can describe where it was, because being somewhere at 2 o'clock in the afternoon is not the same as being in that same place at 3 o'clock in the morning. Because we're conscious, we're able to tell, like, hey, I told you to be here before the street lights come on. Well, I was here at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. That's not the same thing. We're not describing the same concept here. Before the street light comes on is a specific time, right? All right, so we understand consciously what we're talking about. Now, a penteract, what people don't know is I understand at my level that this is, when this begins to understand that it can move, when your mind begins to understand that it can move, a lot of people like to associate the fifth dimension with this concept of cost, okay? I'm just going to throw some things at you real quick. The fifth dimension, I'm going to just tell you, is a shape of a vortex, because as you start to go higher in dimensions, what actually happens is the structure of these become so massive that they begin to collapse. They become dense, they collapse on each other. So they actually go smaller. As you can see, at first we were building outwards, length, width, height, we formed a box. Then we went up to the fourth dimension, the box went inside of another box. So now it's contained by something larger. See, as it goes higher, this is where we get the idea of the quantum realm, where science is starting to prove and we're starting to understand that quantum physics is actually controlling greater physics, which means to say that little tiny particles in us are actually controlling us, not higher things that are bigger than us. So in order, people have this concept of, like, in order for spirits to permeate through everything, they need to be small in order to permeate through your skin cells and stuff. It wouldn't make sense for something bigger to be everything, because people say, like, oh, you're embodied by the Holy Ghost. How can the Holy Ghost get in you if it's not small enough to permeate through you? See, that kind of makes sense. Or if you like into those religious things. So what I'm suggesting the fifth dimension actually is this concept of the heart, right? And your heart is actually a vortex. I'm just going nerding out on you right now. But it's the concept of your heart and the emotions. The ever-present emotions that people can't really understand, like, why do I feel this way? Why does this make me feel this way? It's like, we understand what it is, but in our realm, we call it emotions, and we call it love, and we call it hate, and we call it all these things. But I'm telling you, what it actually is emotions, realm, and hate is a 90-degree angle to the dimension that you actually exist in, and it's just as real as a leg on a table. Love, hate has a physical body, like a structure of time. This is the structure of time right here. Time is all in your mind. It has a physical structure, is what I'm telling you. Is that all your emotions is just as solid as this pen. But because we're confounded by the dimension that we're in, we can't see it. Although if we were in the straw, we can feel the slide going up and down as a ball and kind of suggest that, hey, I feel like I'm down. I feel like I'm up. I feel like, but I can't really tell. I can't prove it. I don't know what would make me happy, but I know if I roll this way, I'm going down. If I roll this way, I'm going up. So there's inferences that we can make about higher dimensions, but we don't really know. But I'm here to put numbers to it and give you guys the knowledge that, I actually do know. You actually do know. Intuitively, a ball does know when it's going up and down. You intuitively know, even though you can't, because we're confined by it, we don't know. Okay, so that's the Pinteract. Okay, let's talk about some of the ways that we can use some of these concepts of mental. And let's talk about what does it mean for this to be describing a point in space. Let's talk about how do we describe a point in space using the heart and emotions and the mind and moments, right? So if I told you that you believe in Santa Claus and it makes you happy, we can triangulate the 5D emotion of being happy and the 4D thought of believing in Santa Claus and triangulate your age, right? Because if you believe in Santa Claus and Christmas makes you happy and stuff, you're probably, a child, maybe? If you buying those beliefs? Because we understand that as we get older, okay, so that's very basic level. You're like, okay, I kind of see that. So let's put it like this. So I recently lost my father, right? I had a father at one point. If I said that the thought is, the thought is, I'm with my father. Now, when my father was here, there was times that he annoyed me. I'm aggravated. That's the emotion behind me being with my father. Now the thought is I'm with my father, and now I'm sad. Now, as time goes, the thought is changed by the emotion. It gives a location. It gives a location to where I am in this point in time, right? Let me kind of talk about other ways that we can use this concept. Hopefully I'm telling you. So pretty much I'm suggesting that you can triangulate where you are in life, where you are in general when you feel lost. If you look at your thoughts and emotions, right? This is the concept of shadow work. Has anybody ever heard of shadow work? Or the concept of relinquishing some of your traumas. Sometimes they tell you, hey, in your mind, they try to get you back into your sound body, which is your up here. Go back in time to what makes you feel bad, and we have to begin to adjust. We can't change what happened, but we have to adjust the way that we feel about what happened, right? That's what they try to tell you in psychology sometimes. This is how we start to begin to understand that we can use these other dimensions to produce different results in our lower dimensions. And why is this important, right? This is important because if we got the tree again and the shadow, and I said, move that tree's shadow, you'd be a fool to walk up to the shadow and try to move it, right? If you move the third dimensional branch, then you will see the shadow moving, right? Now in a higher realm, if I said, now mind you, trees are four-dimensional characters, because trees actually have brains and processing and stuff. They can literally move and tell that the environment is different. They're aware a tree is different from just like regular metal. But for yourself, if I said move your body, you would be a fool to try to move your body without using your mind. You're going to think about, okay, I'm going to move it here, whether you're thinking it consciously or you're thinking it subconsciously, using your mind. Now, in order to move your mind, you got to realize that the body, the same way that the shadow is a shadow of the third dimensional tree, the third dimensional tree is a shadow of the four-dimensional mind, which can be moved by the mind over matter. Then you got to realize that your mind, your time, right? Your time, mind, the moments are a shadow of your four-dimensional spirit, of your feelings, right? So that means that if you're in good spirits, your thoughts will in turn change positive. If you're in low spirits, negative spirits, your thoughts will in turn change negative. And then also your habits, the way that you move your body will also be reflected upon your higher dimensional spirit based upon your lower dimensional mind, based upon the lower dimensional body, right? So that's all to say that how do we begin? So this is what I call relearning to walk. Because a lot of people just, you ever meet somebody, they keep doing the same thing, and they're like, girl, why you keep getting back with that same man? Or, man, why you keep, why can't you learn to stop doing drugs and, whatever? Or why don't you just go work out? Why don't you eat right? Right? It's because they might understand. You can understand something all day. We all know the right answer. But we got to realize that we're not being controlled by our minds. We're not even being controlled by our bodies. A lot of times we give in to our body's will. But the thing that's really controlling us are our emotions about certain thoughts. So until you can see for yourself, that something, until you can attach a critical emotion to an event, you will never change. That's why people have to have transformative experiences in order for them to change. Logically, you man, I know this guy ain't no good for me, but something in my heart is telling me, something in my, you haven't really connected that emotion with it, right? It's like you can know something, but you don't really know it until you know it by what? You know it by heart. You don't got to think about it, right? So the way that you begin to walk without having to physically walk, and I've discovered this because now I keep my mood pretty high. And I notice things just kind of unfold for me, just naturally. You got to begin to attach certain emotions to certain concepts, right? So I don't want to keep you guys here all day. We talked about a lot of, gave you guys a lot of things to think about. Let's see here. Some closing concepts. So this is also going to be a class that builds upon other classes that I'm going to have, but these are some of the initial understandings that you need to understand before I start talking about spiritual things. First, you got to acknowledge that, okay, this is the concept of spirituality that people are talking about, that there are mathematically proven higher dimensions. There are higher dimensions than just 5 dimensions. There are even more dimensions than that. But obviously, it's a mathematical concept, and the higher dimensions do control the lower dimensions. And once you acknowledge for yourself that, hey, I am outside of my body, I can, when they talk about you being able to view every reality at one time, that's just you. If I give you a problem, your brain is a supercomputer. You're thinking about every possibility to that problem. If I say, hey, we're about to rob a bank, you think about going to jail, you think about getting rich, you think about all these things at one time, but how are you seeing that? Because everything is real. How are you seeing that in your brain? Because you're actually there. You got to understand that you're not the body, you are the consciousness of it, you're not the consciousness. But just as so you're trying to control the shadow, the shadow doesn't exist separately from the tree. The tree is the shadow. As in, it's not that we aren't our bodies, it's that we are our bodies, but we also are the spirit as well, and we also are these other things, right? So, pretty much want to give you guys an introduction into controlling your thoughts, but understanding that controlling your emotions are more important than controlling your thoughts, because your emotions will, and not just emotions, it's spirits, because spirit, you can have a spirit of discipline, there's a lot of different other aspects, mathematical, literal aspects that play, and they're more physical than what you think they are. Your patterns are more physical, your emotions are physical. Just because you can't see it doesn't mean that it's not a physical object, It's not woo-ha, it's actually there. So that's pretty much my introduction. I'm not gonna keep you guys forever. But do you guys have any questions? Hopefully you guys learned something new. I don't know. Questions or anything? All right. But yeah, that concludes my class for today. Thank you guys for joining in today. All right.